Christina Weaver, a co-founder of the Women's Creative, and excited to be with you today to talk about hiring and firing, how we say hello and goodbye to our team. Really excited to get into this. It requires a lot of thought and planning and preparation, but I think when you structure it and you do it right, it's a really fun process and makes a huge difference for your business. So just so you know, these short form courses are all in preparation for the Women's Creative to launch on Mighty Networks. As you know, and hopefully you're pulling this up on Mighty Networks, this is an incredible app platform where you can engage with other business owners, find our entire library of resources, and find groups of people that you can ask questions to, let people know what your business has going on, and just dig into our community. So hope you found Mighty Networks and enjoy this. The Women's Creative exists to dare creative brands to impact their world. So we help women own businesses grow, and we do what we can to fill their needs and understand what their pain points are and help them move past them. So today we're talking about hiring and firing. We're going to spend most of the time talking about hiring because if you hire well and really take the time to do that, firing doesn't happen as often and is easy and quick. So hiring should always start with a very clear organizational chart. In the PowerPoint that's attached to this video, you'll find the first two slides are samples of organizational charts. Org charts are something that large companies do. I would highly recommend, no matter how big you are, to get started with one. The reason why they're really helpful is it's a simple way to do some very long-term planning. So when you sit to do your organizational chart, think to yourself, where do I want to be in 5 years? We have a mentor that works with us in the Women's Creative who we love, and he was in business for decades, and he calls this the end state realization. So pick a period of time, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 8 years, maybe it's 3, and ask yourself, where do I want my team to be at the end of this period of time? Maybe you want 1 employee. Maybe you want 10 employees. Maybe you have stores or locations all over the country and you have 150 employees. Whatever that is, think about that goal and then build out the structure of this org chart based on where you want to go. And you don't have to build it out completely, especially if you're looking at dozens of employees, but you do need to understand especially that core leadership group that's going to sit with you as an owner, who is close, and what lines of business are those people going to carry, or what work are those people going to carry. So I gave you 2 examples of organizational charts. The first one is a round organizational chart. So I have ownership at the middle, and then around it are different either lines of business or departments. And so for your business, this might be a department. You might have marketing, you might have merchandising, you might have buying, you may have scheduling. It could be a variety of things. For a different company, this might be an entire business line. You might have a retail store, an e-commerce platform, and a service-based business. So an example might be maybe your retail store also has a physical space, like a brick and mortar, and an e-commerce, and then you also do styling. And that's a service that you provide to your audience. At the Women's Creative, we similarly have a variety of lines of business. I have directors that sit and lead each of those lines of business. So for yours, similarly, you might want to think about calling them directors. These people could also be managers or coordinators. So titles are something you want to think about, as they can often be correlated to the level of responsibility and sometimes correlated to the level of compensation. So I gave just some very simple ways that I break down leadership titles here. So director, manager, coordinator, I already mentioned. Those people would be in your inner ring. So your ownership's in the middle, then those other leaders are right outside, and then your support staff are who they hire and manage. So I gave an example of calling them associates. Other types of employees or people that might work for you include contractors. So contractors are often a great place to start if you're not ready to hire someone hourly that's an actual employee or potentially full-time. You can contract out work like your social media, your graphic design, even your product fulfillment, or scheduling if you're a service-based person. So contractors, I still put them on my organizational chart, but I put them a little bit to the side. And then when you really get into it, you can start drawing lines from these different boxes to kind of figure out who answers to who, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The second type of org chart that I put on here is a more triangular shaped org chart. So it keeps ownership at the top, and then your lines of business or your departments line up under that. I tend to use the round organizational chart because sometimes some of my directors or managers answer to other directors and managers, and that gives me the opportunity to really show how the work is flowed in kind of a web. A more triangular pyramid shaped organizational chart really keeps everything going up directly to the owner. And sometimes that's really, really important, especially if you are someone who is a personal brand where those people are really they are supporting your personal brand. It also can be very, very important if you are a medical professional or maybe a real estate agent or somewhere where it is your time specifically that people are paying for, and everyone else under you is kind of answering to like what you need in order to give your time to your customers. So all kinds of interesting ways to look at this. These are just two. There are others. I would highly recommend when you're thinking about hiring, starting with an organizational chart. You'll know where you want to go in the future, how many positions, and it helps you do the next step, which is to write a job description. So you really want to define who you need and how you need them, and you want to define it before you actually need them. So maybe you're just kicking off your business, maybe you're just thinking about a business. Understanding making plans to build out a team will help you both understand what to do when, so you're not caught off guard when you have too much work, you need to pass them off. It also will give you that sense of confidence. I can do this, and I know where I'm going and how to build my team. Because people are how business grows. And so it's important to know that eventually leaning on others is going to be part of what you do. The next thing that I feel like is really important is to understand and break down your workflow and what your work actually is. So you kind of have an idea of how that team is going to answer to each other. And then you have to answer the question, what are all these people exactly going to do? And I kind of gave a workflow diagram in your packet as well, in your PowerPoint. You'll find that you can fill in with your specific information. So these are meant to kind of be worksheets, even though they look like charts, and you can kind of fill them in. I gave a little bit more information on this one as examples. So for this, you're going to put your main line of business in the middle. If you're a retailer, let's say you retail clothing, you're going to stick that in the middle. If you are a photographer, you're going to say, your performing photography is in the middle. Then you're going to think about all the things you need to do to make that happen. So that could be your taxes and all of your finances and business development. It could be your marketing, your sales. And you're going to think about those things and break them down around the outside. And then you're going to work on defining what the actual work is that you need done. And it may be if you're just a one-woman show that you're doing all this by yourself. But to break down what all the work is really important to begin with so that as that work grows, you know what you're handing off. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to decide that. Then the next chart is a RACI chart. And if you've been to any of our workshops, you will have seen something like this before. I use RACI charts to organize my team. I also use them to write job descriptions. So a RACI chart, RACI stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consulted, and Informed. So it's RACI. And you do this for team planning basically by breaking down all of those tasks from that flow chart, the kind of like web chart that I just showed you. You take that and you break all that information down to understand who is the owner of this chunk of work, whether it's your social media. Who actually owns that? Who is responsible for it? Who is accountable for it? So who's watching it to make sure it's done right? And sometimes if you're a small business, the answer is always going to be you. Who's consulted on it? So what resources do you use or pull in to get it done right? And then who's informed about it? So once the work is done, who reports back to? And again, that could just be you. It could be a group of people. It could be your entire team. So I gave you an example in here of a job description that we have. So if you know Lindsay, who runs all of our programming with the Women's Creative, this is actually her job description. So that RACI chart, thinking about responsible, that is core. That's going to be a list of core tasks that you're going to use to create a job description. So writing this job description and breaking it down, the more detailed, the better. I also keep it, somewhat high level. I write a list of tasks. I don't do it paragraph form. I make sure to list those core tasks. These are the things that individual is going to own. They are responsible for them. They're going to create them. They are going to strategize them. They're going to own them. Then I list the supporting tasks, and this is where they're probably going to be partnering or working with someone else. So on the RACI chart, this is what sits under accountable and consulted. So these are the things that, who are they going to be accountable to and with or what projects are they going to be accountable to, and what projects are they going to be consulting others on. And then I always list reporting responsibilities. Now, the reporting responsibilities will tie back to all of your, how you're actually managing and tracking your employees' work. And this just says, this is what I want to see from you to prove that you are doing what I'm asking you to do. And for us, these are often like very quick. We do them quarterly. We look at actual numbers. And if you're a one-woman show, this is a great way to start. Think through like what reports do you want to run for yourself to track over time that you are meeting your goals. So this might just be sales. It could be social media engagement. It could be number of events that you run or number of new clients. It could be your email list growing. Whatever key things that you want to track for growth, they might be things you start by doing yourself, and then eventually you'll hand them off to these employees. So when you project into hiring, so you're kind of thinking through, okay, I'm going to hire, usually do it in two ways. Either you're making money and things are going really, really well and you're desperate and you need to hire. So if that's the situation, you are going to start exactly where everybody else starts. So create that long-term organizational chart. Even if you are really, really busy, hit pause, take an hour, just do it. It's a great practice and it'll help you understand where you're going and how to communicate to your employees. And then understand what hills are you going to die on? What things does your business do that you have to do, that you have to direct? Maybe this is your voice on social media. Maybe it is your voice. You cannot hand that off to anybody else. Maybe it's your buying. Maybe just the idea of hiring someone to support your buying just is absolutely not something you will do. So understand what you really have to hold on to, and then understand what you don't, and hire into those things that you are willing to give up and willing to have support on. And then let go of it carefully. And the last thing will always be financially plan for those employees. So understand how much you're going to pay them. Understand the total cost of the employee. And in this slide, you'll see a link to a calculator that can help you understand total cost. So this will be all the taxes you have to pay for those employees, any benefits, etc. And then plan into that as you're making your sales projections and your budgeting. Now, sometimes you need to hire to make money, and you hire people before the work is really coming in. In this case, you need to understand how to fundraise or finance your business before you ever get started. You're going to set clear sales goals and objectives for your employees because they're going to have to prove that they are, worth what you're paying them. And then set them up for success by really defining exactly what you need them to do, what the company's sales goals are, what your plans are, and then giving them the authority to really take it. This is a place where I would highly recommend hiring in experts. This is going to be worth it to hire someone who has 5, 8, 10 years of experience, someone who has run profit and loss reports and held entire lines of business. They are probably the people who are going to be most successful for you. Maybe they're people who have done a significant amount of sales, or it's another professional in the industry for the business that you're working on growing. All right, and then finding and interviewing people. This is an art, not a science. The first place I would always recommend is networking for talent acquisition, Be careful hiring your friends. So this is not a recommendation to hire your sister or your cousin, but start with your people. Intentionally network to meet more people. And a great place or a great practice here might be literally listing who you know, their experience, and how they could potentially fill in. Sometimes what happens is you find the right person, they're not necessarily qualified for the job that you're thinking you were going to fill, but they are qualified for a whole other chunk of work that you need help on. It's always worth it to bring in the right people. You're going to get more out of them, and sometimes you can train them into what you're wanting to do. Look to your audience for talent acquisition. So this is social media, email, putting up signage if you have a studio, if you have a retail store, if you have a restaurant or a coffee shop. And then look to software. So I always recommend go to software last. It's a long game. Hiring can take a long time. Try not to put yourself in a situation where you're desperate for help when you hire, so you can really take your time. And two that I always recommend are Facebook Jobs and Indeed. Both are nuanced. I won't get into them too much, but they're options. All right, and then once you pick your people, or how do you pick your people, you want to make sure to match their personality to the job. I like to start by defining the archetype. So really write down the type of person you want for this job before you ever start interviewing or finding someone. Visualize who they might be, how they talk, how they might dress, who they know, or what their experience is. And then define their personality. Maybe you need an introvert who is capable of sitting behind a screen quietly and getting a lot done in large periods of time. If that's the case, you might not want to hire someone who only has sales experience, like door-to-door sales experience, because they are probably going to be very extroverted. So just think through personality as you're hiring. Know yourself really, really well. Know how you work, who you like to work with, and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses might be, so that you're hiring potentially into your weaknesses, but not so much that people are going to conflict with you. And then know your brand. Understand its values, what it stands for, and really define as you are interviewing who your company is. And if you show that publicly, people are going to know, and you will weed out people who are not the right fit automatically, because it's very clear who you are. Also, I've repeated this before in a previous video too, but being clear is kind. Thank you, Brene Brown. Define your work expectations. Define the work ethic that you expect, the values that you're expecting from your employees, and set them up for success by being really clear from the beginning. All right, and then let's talk a little bit about who to fire as we close up. So when you go to fire well, you always start by essentially building a case. And building a case for or against keeping someone starts the first day that they start working with you. So you're going to communicate expectations on their success from day one. You're going to list what your goals are for them, what your objectives are, and you're going to check in regularly. That could be weekly, could be every other week, could be quarterly. That check-in is going to look like a lot of different things, because you're going to do what you can to support their work, but they're also going to report to you how they are succeeding. And working that out and defining it could take us a long time. So I'm just going to touch on that and move on. I would say write everything down. Make sure that what you want from your employees is written down, that their job description is not handed to them before you hire and then never looked at again, but that it's something you refer to all the time, and that when you are meeting with them one-on-one, when you're checking in on how they're doing, that you're following up with written notes over email and that they're doing the same. When you have to fire someone, do it quickly and very quietly. Don't hesitate. A lot of times we have gut feelings that this person's not the right person after they've worked with us for a period of time. You need to take your time and build that case, but do it quickly, do it intentionally, and then fire when you're ready. Severance is always something to consider when you fire. Think through how long those people have worked for you. Think through how much they've done for your company. And then I would say be generous in your severance. It gives people as soft a feeling as possible. It's like a soft landing. When you give them a severance, I would also consider having them sign a non-disclosure agreement. I'm not an attorney, I can't hand you an example, but they're not hard to find. And you don't want people going out into the world and bashing you. You also don't want people talking significantly about the type of work or how you do it. So a non-disclosure agreement gives you that safety. I've also included an article that I highly recommend about firing from Forbes, about firing gracefully, firing quickly, and just firing with as much consideration. Please understand that firing someone is often doing them a favor. It's good for them as well as being good for your company. And then one thing to always keep in mind is that who you fire and how you fire defines your success as much, if not more, than who you hire. So don't hesitate. It's almost impossible to get to know someone in a few interviews, and know that as you are moving through people, you're getting towards a core team that you can sit with for a long time and will really help grow your business. So people do everything for us. They help us get where we want to be and to reach our goals. Caring well for our teams is important, and I hope that these few tips helped you kind of define and get ready to build your team and who your company could potentially be as a group of people and not just one. So thanks so much for tuning in.